Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is Eden Maybon of lightcycleastrology.com. I hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Today, we are kicking off this week's content with a series I'm titling the Valentine's Day Conjunctions that takes a look at a pair of prominent conjunctions happening in the sky this week between Venus and Neptune and the Sun and Saturn. Today, we're looking at the Venus-Neptune conjunction, and tomorrow we'll be talking about the Sun-Saturn conjunction and tying it all together into one grand Valentine's Day or Valentine's Week delineation here. But first, I'd like to mention that this channel is funded by my consultation service on lightcycleastrology.com. We are looking for new clients for 2023, so if you're interested in becoming a client, please visit me on lightcycleastrology.com. All right, let's get into today's content. I'll pull up the real-time clock here, and we will take a look at these conjunctions that are happening simultaneously in the sky. We see that Sunday, we already had Venus and Neptune move into that 3-degree range of orb. So this energy is just now making contact, and as of today, the Sun and Saturn conjunction is moving very rapidly within that 3-degree range of influence as well. So this is a really interesting Valentine's week because we have both of these energies. If we just had one conjunction or the other, it would be a bit simpler one way or another what's happening. But the fact that we get two conjunctions that really are almost thematically or archetypally antithetical to one another in some ways is really interesting. So it sort of gives us a kind of a polarity that is pretty extreme with these energies as Valentine's Day is coming around this week. So there's a lot of good, but there's also potentially a lot of I don't want to say bad, but something that is more challenging with this Sun-Saturn conjunction. So we are going to talk about the Venus-Neptune conjunction today and then get into the Sun-Saturn conjunction tomorrow on Valentine's Day. Now, we did go into the Sun-Saturn conjunction last week, but that was really in the context of Saturn falling under the beams of the sun. So this week we're going to talk about it again, but more in the context of how both of these conjunctions are pairing up together in the sky as it relates to things that might have to do with Valentine's Day and love and things like that, relationships. Okay, so the timing of Venus-Neptune, the conjunction began, or the adherence between the two planets begins Sunday, and by today it's moving and building towards the perfection that actually happens on Wednesday, but the day after Valentine's Day. But what's interesting to me is that Venus is within about a degree and maybe a half or so away from Neptune. So the energy between Venus and Neptune, it's building towards that peak on Valentine's Day. So I think that is really interesting. Whereas sometimes when planets make their conjunction the exact degree that they meet up with, sometimes that is the peak of the energy. So it's like you get this really romantic pushing energy that is building and building and building on Valentine's Day, and then there's sort of like a morning after on Wednesday where the energy peaks out. That is really interesting. Now, the perfection between the Sun and Saturn comes a little bit later, but still it's very, very close as all of this is happening between Venus and Neptune. Okay, let's get into some of the themes for Venus and Neptune like we like to do on this channel. So theme number one for the energies of Venus and Neptune being atomically blended or welded together within an adherence or conjunction. Theme number one gives us that given that this conjunction is happening within the bound terms of Mars, and Mars is receiving an opposition from the moon in Sagittarius in Jupiter's other sign, are there conversations we are having with ourselves or other people that we feel need to be defended, passions of the body or things we passionately want for the future, etc. Okay, now I know that I've been mentioning the bounds here and there on the channel, so I actually want to, let's go ahead one more time back to the real-time clock here. And if you're not familiar with the bound terms, the Egyptian or Ptolemaic bound terms. Let's go ahead and just give us a little bit of a breakdown for this, just a really quick, simple breakdown, so you can get a little bit of this theme number one here without me confusing you on it. Okay, so you'll see now that normally we just have the zodiac signs on this outer wheel here, but now each sign is being divided by a glyph, a planetary glyph. So within Pisces, we have the biggest portion of Pisces is now being divided by Venus. And then we have a smaller portion of Jupiter, an even smaller portion of Mercury. And then we have a pretty good sized portion of Mars, and then a pretty tiny portion of Saturn. So each sign within the bound terms is like a little city of refuge within that sign itself. And when planets travel through other bound terms that don't belong to them, it's like they owe something to the city governor, or like it's like they have to abide by the rules, or it might be that they're obligated, or that they are sort of having to fulfill responsibilities or obligations to that bound term lord as they travel through that bound terms. Now, if a planet is traveling through their own bound terms, then it's like they don't owe anything except for to themselves. And it's like they're in their own temple or domicile where they can sort of be naturally who they are. So one thing that is interesting that we are talking about for theme number one is that on Valentine's Day, February the 14th here, we see that if we examine the bounds, we see that Venus and Neptune are forming that adherence within the bounds of Mars. So right away, we know that something about this energy is obligated somehow or another to the planet Mars. The energy will still filter through the lens of Jupiter kinds of things. So Venus will still want to do Jupiterian kinds of things, or that's what she has to work with. So for instance, Venus likes love and Jupiter likes to give you a lot of something. So Venus really might be making this contact with Neptune and saying, the sky is the absolute limit with love or passion or desire or beauty or anything Venusian, right? But there's something connected to Mars where Venus is obligated somehow to Mars. Well, at the same time as Valentine's Day comes in, the moon is sweeping through in opposition to Mars. That's really interesting. We also see that coincidentally or synchronistically, Mars is in the bounds of Venus. So Venus and Mars are in each other's bounds. They owe something to each other. That is, I think, a good thing, because it's like the lovers are, it's like they're loyal to each other, or they know that they are obligated to each other. So that's really interesting. The sky is the limit on one hand for love and relationships and beauty and pleasure and desire, but it's still somehow obligated to the passions and the raw motivation that is often associated with the planet Mars. Now, Mars traveling through a sign that is ruled or looked after by Mercury, a planet that is very mental and all about communication and conversations and things like that, ideas, receiving an opposition from the moon, you get the sense that there is tension, which is good for relationships. Sometimes tension is a good thing. It provides a, that makeup sex or that lover's tension that inspires the attraction to begin with. But there is some tension that has something to do with potentially having to defend an idea, defend a conversation or an opinion, maybe perhaps, or defend something that you want to do, that you're sort of throwing the idea out there and saying, this is what I want to do. And the moon. So the moon could represent here something like your marriage partner. It could represent something like your family. It could represent something akin to like your body. So are there tensions that you feel like you have to talk about, defend, argue with, that have to do with what feels good to your body, what feels good to your mind, or maybe what feels good to one of one of the two lovers and not the other. There's a little bit of something in opposition here, and Venus is obligated to that. So that is one of the themes that we see for this Valentine's Day, is kind of obligation, intense love or attraction that has a lot of tension. But also we might see something like, well, I need to defend this idea. I need to argue this idea. And, maybe even if things get rough, I might have to separate in order to be on my own and reside within the desire that I'm feeling or the things that I'm very passionate about. So that gives you a little bit of a broad sense of some of the energy that is forming. Okay, theme number 2 is there beauty coming on the horizon, or will we receive a wet blanket thrown on our dreams? So this really is now where we're getting into the fact that we're having these two conjunctions form in the sky at the same time. We are having this Venus-Neptune conjunction, which is very dreamy and passionate and sensual. And it sort of is looking ahead towards the springtime sign of Aries, which is always what Pisces does, right? It sort of longs for something romantic in the past, while at the same time being really excited and anticipating the future where things are blooming and very sensual and romantic as well. So Venus representing beauty, making this contact with Neptune that has this endless horizontal expanse off into eternity. Neptune, a planet that is just, it's the largest body. Technically, it's the last planet in the solar system. But as we who are interested in astrology know, we are still including Pluto in there because we love Pluto. But Neptune technically, is on the edge of the known, and it looks beyond. And so Neptune has this quality that is sort of like existentially or eternally expansive. It sees the horizons in Pisces. It looks towards a new spring, but there's no end to it. So is beauty coming on the horizon? Or will this Sun-Saturn conjunction be like a wet blanket that sort of throws water on our dreams? That's another thing that could come up. Okay, theme number 3 is there a treasure hunt of some kind that embroils us in some kind of competitive drama? So this one I derived. Now, I'll be honest with you. This one is more from my own interest in the planet Neptune, because when I began really intensively studying astrology within the context of Hellenistic astrology or classic or traditional astrology, I did so while also including the newer discovered planets. But I was not satisfied completely with how the newly discovered planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were being classified in terms of their archetypal signature. I felt like, and I still feel like this sometimes, that when we talk about the more ancient traditional planets like Venus, for instance, there is a broad spectrum of archetypal signatures that Venus could represent. So, for instance, Venus could represent the desire for cleanliness, or having something be beautiful is because it's clean. And it can represent the desire to go to war. It can represent a sister that is younger and maybe more beautiful, or what have you. Or it could represent the justice in a courtroom. So there's such a broad spectrum that Venus represents. Sorry, this is a tangent I'm going on here, but the way in which I arrived at theme number 3, some of the things in here, is because when I took a closer look at the circumstances surrounding Neptune's discovery, which is how, generally speaking, astrologers ascribed archetypal signatures or symbols to this planet, were that there were a lot of I don't know if you've ever seen this old, probably you haven't, but there's an old classic movie called It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And it's just chaos where I forget the plot, basically. I forget the plot, but essentially what it is that there is buried treasure and there's a map, and all of these people get roped into this, and they all want to find the treasure first. So the whole movie is them just being totally crazy and outlandish, trying to get there first and beat the other people. And, they sort of team up and try to work together. And it's like a really funny movie. But when Neptune was discovered, it had a similar aura around it, because we had previously discovered Uranus, and Uranus was being tugged by something that was unknown. So they discovered Uranus, and they calculated the orbit, and they said, okay, Uranus should be traveling through an orbit that has this kind of a shape and takes this long and everything. And the math did not line up with their observations. So they knew that something was off. This was the first thing that gets attached to Neptune as a symbol, that something, maybe there's something else there. There's something that is longing. There's something out there we don't know, and it sort of tugs on us, and it's very mysterious. And then eventually they discovered Neptune, and when they did, it was like, bam, there it is. It was very easily discovered. But the race to this intermittent period between the discovery of Neptune and when they figured out that something was pulling on Neptune, and the actual discovery of Neptune, was like a treasure hunt within the astronomical community. Everybody was trying to find it. Amateurs, professionals, institutions, everybody was racing to get there. And there were some underhanded things that took place during the race to discover Neptune, and after the race, after we had discovered it. There was all sorts of things if you read the history. So there is, I believe that there is something that Neptune signifies that gets us close to this mad, 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 mad world kind of energy, where there's a little bit like a treasure hunt. There's things that it sort of entice us into acting really crazy, and we get embroiled in these competitive dramas. And again, we're saying that this is all taking place in the bound terms of Mars, a planet that is already competitive. So I'm sort of tying in the bound terms again here with this, but if you're interested in Neptune, it's just, just read about its discovery and what happened after. There was all sorts of interesting things that really symbolize and get attached to Neptune. So basically what I'm saying is that when people talk about Neptune in astrology, they're like, okay, you're going to get confused. You're going to do drugs. You're going to like it. I feel like they narrow the signature of Neptune way, way too much as compared to the more traditional planets, where maybe you get something like an Easter egg hunt kind of vibe with Neptune. Maybe you get competitive drama where there's just craziness happening because everybody wants to find the gold. Another thing that was happening around the time of Neptune's discovery were the American gold rush was also underway, or was soon to be underway. I forget the timing, but it was transpiring near the time of the discovery of Neptune. And everybody was rushing to move west into California, into Washington, up to Alaska. This whole period where people just acted completely crazy and mad and went in search of gold. So is there a treasure hunt of some kind that embroils us in some kind of competitive drama? This luster, this wanderlust almost to find treasure is in there somewhere, I think. So now this could be represented for somebody that you are falling in love with, or somebody that you care about, or it could be a desire, like a car, that it just something that seems like it's going to solve all of your problems for the moment. That is really getting into some of the energy of theme number 3. Okay, theme number 4 is there no limits as to what we can imagine right now? Is this a time to go further than we normally would after that which we truly desire? Or do we find ourselves overreaching more than we normally would for that which we desire? So this is pretty close to theme number 3, but it just, it draws out a little bit more of that, this conjunction taking place in the sign that is ruled over by Jupiter. in the ancient or traditional astrology. Pisces is a sign that is presided over by Jupiter. And as we all know, Jupiter sometimes goes too far. And then with Neptune there, it's pretty clear that there is definitely a tendency here to just go way too far for what it is that we desire, what it is that we want. So do we find ourselves reaching more than we normally would? Or is this a time to go further than we normally would? You could say that this sort of gives us the courage maybe to go after something we normally wouldn't. It could be like, okay, normally I wouldn't think that I deserve this or want this. And you know what? It's like now it's possible. I can imagine it. And maybe I do deserve it. And maybe that's a good thing. So there might be this energy that says, you limit yourself. Now, with a Sun-Saturn conjunction at the same time, that might really tie into this energy where there's this kind of tension between Sun and Saturn and Venus and Neptune. On the one side, one of the energies is saying, maybe you deserve this and you should go after it. Why not? And you can imagine it and see it. But then on the other hand, it's like Sun-Saturn is saying, no, hold on, be practical. Like, is this realistic? Do we really deserve it? Maybe we don't. Maybe we're just going too far. So I think theme number 4 really gets into this dynamic between the two conjunctions that is sort of antithetical or oppositional in some thematic way that's pulling back and forth. Okay, and lastly, we have theme number 5, general good fortune that somehow is paired with something treacherous, risk or reward. Something like designer drugs, falling in love with a complete stranger, swimming with sharks, etc. Yeah, so I run into, on my astronomy tours up to Mauna Kea, part-time job that I have, I run into people that are on vacation, and I'm showing them the stars and the observatories on top of Mauna Kea, and there's a very popular thing right now where people can swim with sharks. And, I usually ask them, is this the kind of swimming that you're in the cage, or are you out of the cage? So I think with theme number 5, we really get into another thing that was happening around the time that Neptune was discovered. If you look at the actual discovery chart of Neptune, there was a conjunction between Neptune and the planet Saturn. So one of the symbolisms I think that could be derived from what Neptune represents as a symbol within archetypal reality is that Neptune can portend that there are things we have great imagination for, but somehow it's very, very near or blended with things that could be treacherous, like Saturn kinds of things. So theme number 5 gets into this pairing of treachery. So general good fortune somehow paired with great imagination, but also being paired with a planet that archetypally connects to things that may be treacherous. So things like risk and reward. If you don't try, you'll never succeed. But some things that we want to obtain, that we desire, it's risky to try to go after them. So it's like a little bit of uncharted waters kind of a thing. Something like maybe falling in love with a complete stranger. You just see somebody and you're just totally enamored by them, but you don't know anything about them. So how's that going to work out? There's a little bit of risk in that for sure. Or something like swimming with sharks, but without the cage, which is happening with a lot of people. Apparently it's safe, but in any case, that gives us a few themes to work with for this pairing of Venus and Neptune, and sort of tying in the Sun and Saturn pairing as well, all together for our Valentine's Day signature here. So I hope you found something useful out of this. Please like, share, and subscribe on the video, and leave me a comment what you think about these energies that are happening in the sky right now. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to get into the Sun-Saturn dynamic within the series, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be back again tomorrow. Happy Valentine's Day. Bye for now.